this first half, the number 12 seed. Here's Clifford splitting the difference. Reese was challenging and Clifford, a tough two to get. It'll be the final bucket of the first half, and it's a beauty.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 24, and as the new intro video for today suggests, we are back talking about the NBA draft. Last week, Troy Finnegan and I did a big, long podcast talking about all of the different options for the Utah Jazz at number 5 overall. But today we're going to be talking about 3 more players. And the 3 players, the most high-profile players we have here from the Mountain Time Zone teams, and diving deep into all 3 of those guys and kind of how their draft stock has either risen or fallen or kind of stayed the same throughout the last couple months. And just kind of, like I said, doing deep dives on these guys as we get ready to see how their NBA careers progress in the first couple of years. It should be an interesting conversation today. We have a special guest on the show from No Ceilings NBA. The best place to get NBA draft coverage is Tyler Rucker, one of the founders of No Ceilings. Tyler, thanks for coming on here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, sir. I'm excited about this one and excited to talk some hoops as always.
Yeah, obviously, your work at No Ceilings, you guys had the latest mock draft out today, big board last week. The draft guide is available out there for $15 for everybody. I bought it last week, and it's absolutely worth it. You guys, it seems like you put so much time and effort into that thing. So I hope you guys are getting rewarded for that, because it is some really, really good stuff. Just quickly before we get into these guys, how did you get to start doing this? And I get this is what, year 3 or 4 for you guys at No Ceilings doing the draft, and just kind of how did you find the niche? Because obviously all the big outlets like The Ringer, ESPN, Bleacher Report, they all have their draft guys, but this is what you guys do all year round, and you guys do a great job, obviously.
No, yeah, it's year 4 for us. It's been a long 4 years, but a very fun 4 years. So yeah, sport's been great, but it was one of those things where a lot of us had kind of been doing this on our own. You know, we were all obsessed with the drafts in some capacity, and we're trying to kind of like, okay, let's start podcasting. And I think everyone was going on their own road. And me and Corey Tolba, who's like a co-founder with me, we kind of talked, and I was like, hey, I have this idea. Like, why are we all doing this solo? Let's try to get on the same page and make a run at this and make this something legit. And Corey was like, all right, well, let's find some other folks too. Like, we had some guys in consideration, and then it all kind of just fell into place. And since then it's been one of those things where it's been a great team. Everyone's, you know, all full steam ahead. It's a well-oiled machine right now, but we all know, like, we knew we signed up for kind of the long-term grind where it was going to be like, hey, we're not going to get results immediately. We've got to stay at this, stay consistent. And it's been awesome. It's been a great public response, and fans are fantastic. We love everyone, but it's just, we wanted to give spotlight to all prospects. Like, guys that are getting undrafted should be getting feature pieces. And it's always fun to talk about the big guys that are going to go in the top 10, but it's like, well, who else? And we were like, those guys deserve the same spotlight. So that's been our goal ever since.
Yeah, you guys have 100 guys covered in the draft guide with all the hundreds of pages you got for all the guy for in the entire thing. I like the point you made about the features about undrafted guys, because in my day job with the Denver Gazette, like, I'm writing features about guys that are, if anybody's even considered a draft prospect, that's a big deal for Colorado State, all the teams in the area. Like KJ Simpson last year was a guy I covered really heavily during his time, and obviously went in the second round to the Hornets. But then, there's guys like Jalen Wells from Washington State who go undrafted and or a second round pick and become like rookie of the year candidates for the Grizzlies. So there's always guys to cover. And I said this on last week's episode, but I think since 2011, which was the Kyrie draft, that was my first draft that I really, really dug into. This last thing before we get into these 3 prospects, how has your scouting process evolved over the years, and how did you get to the point where you are now, where you're comfortable, maybe you're a little bit more comfortable evaluating these guys?
Yeah, I feel like I'm my harshest critic usually when it comes to that. It's one of those where, like, before we did No Ceilings and everything, I was kind of grinding on the side, trying to make it like everybody else in the league, and I was trying to figure out so I was like, I wanted to take scouting seriously, so I was trying to pick the minds of a lot of people around the league and get some mentors, if you want to put it that way. And it got to a point now where I'm kind of, I think, more patient than I've usually been. And when I started this out, usually it was like, oh, like if a guy has a bad stretch of games, like I'm out on him. And now it's turned more into like the patience of like, okay, I was always taught, don't get too high, don't get too low. So I think now it's just more patient and realizing to take in the full slate and like evaluate, like, hey, what happened here? Why is there a cold stretch? Was he injured? And also balancing like some intel as well.
All right, well let's dive into these three guys here, and I want to do it in the order of how you guys have them on your collective big board over at No Ceilings. You guys starting off with Carter Bryant from Arizona. You guys have him at number 9. I did my full top 30 on last week's pod, and I actually have Carter Bryant at number 9 on my big board as well, not team specific or anything. And you guys have him mocked in the latest mock draft to the Blazers at number 11. Just starting off. The first question, why has he kind of been maybe the biggest riser in this class, in your opinion?
It's one of those things where I think the pre-draft process, you see a lot of guys that if you keep, there's always like some check marks to make when you're going through the pre-draft process. Like, all right, did you have a good combine? Are you interviewing well? The measurements? Like, I feel like if you keep checking those boxes, you can quickly make some noise. And Carter was one of these names where throughout the year, he's a freshman at Arizona. He didn't have this great production. He was coming off the bench mainly, but big time.
Yeah, only five starts
right.
in 30 games, less than 20 minutes a game. Yeah.
It was one of those things where he was also like a late riser in high school, and I'd seen him the last couple of years and seen like the physical transformation and how much better he's gotten just as a player. So I was like, okay, that tells me the work ethic's going to be great. And throughout the whole year, everyone thought around the league that he was a first-round pick. And I was like, that's usually very loud if someone doesn't have great production and they still see him as a first-round guy. So I think now he's shown the defensive ability really took off this year for Arizona, and he's having a great process. Everything I've heard about his, interviews has been outstanding. So I think teams always look for 3-and-D guys with upside. And in this draft, you quickly need to find one of those. So I think there's a couple guys that have, made some noise, and Carter's one of those where I think teams are just really intrigued by kind of the upside, but also how safe he could be as just like at least a 3-and-D guy, but maybe there's some more there to untap.
Yeah, I was going to get to that in a little bit. I mean, maybe Cedric Coward from Washington State has been the biggest overall riser, as just kind of maybe like a guy most people didn't know about before this past college basketball season started, and now pretty clear first round pick, maybe top 15, top 20. And Carter, like you said, you were here in first round throughout the season, and so that's kind of not surprising that he's crept into the top 10 discussion now. When you would watch Arizona games, and did he kind of pop for you on the screen? Because it felt like that for me. I mean, he was in a pretty deep wing rotation in a pretty deep team overall at Arizona, especially in terms of a college context. What was kind of the process for you of watching him throughout the season? How did you see him grow throughout that year at Arizona?
I thought it was going to be a little bit of a tough fit just at Arizona starting out, because I was like, this is a roster that had a lot of veterans, a lot of, upperclassmen that have been there for a while. So they're not going to just, hey, let's pass the torch to the freshman right away just because he's talented. I thought he's going to have to earn it. And early on, I thought he looked like a freshman that's like, how can I stay on the court? So he's playing a little, like nervous, if you want to put it that way, just trying not to mess up, which is, you just can't play that way. He popped every time. So I was like, well, what else he's got to do? And, I thought sometimes they would pull him a little too quick after a mistake. And I was like, you're going to crush his confidence. So throughout the year, it became more obvious with me watching them. I was like, this is one of the best guys on your team. You got to play him more. You got to find him minutes, be like, install some confidence. And when I had even talked to scouts, they're like, what are they doing? They got to play this kid more. And so as the year went on, I think you saw what their plan was, though. Like the confidence started piling up. The defense really started unlocking to another level. He just popped all the time when I was watching him on tape, especially defensively, and his way to make an impact and make winning plays without scoring a bunch. I just thought I felt him when he's on the court. One of my biggest things with scouting is like, if you're in the game and I can't notice you, that's a red flag to me. Like if you're a ghost out there. So I think with Carter, I always felt when he's on the court, I was like, oh gosh, he's just moving all over the place, trying to find a way to make an impact.
Yeah, I remember watching him. I think it was early in the year in the Duke game, and just kind of you would see like those little bit of flashes, and you're like, oh, I kind of like that guy. But like you said, they had KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley. This is a pretty deep wing rotation. Obviously, the offense is built around Caleb Love. It was an interesting team, and but by the end of the year, I remember I was in Seattle for covering Colorado State's in the NCAA tournament. And after CSU loses to Maryland on the Derek Queen buzzer beater, then it's Oregon, Arizona in this old school Pac-10 rivalry in the NCAA tournament. And I thought Carter Bryant was one of the best players in that game. And I just, the growth he showed throughout the season, I was like, I don't know if he's coming back. I know I was talking to people that cover Arizona while I was in Seattle, and they're like, oh, he might come back. There's kind of conversations. The coaching staff is not really sure. But then kind of watching that game against Oregon, I was like, he's probably not coming back. It didn't feel like it. And the next question I had for you was, because you alluded to this a little bit, like obviously he's rising because he's a 3-and-D guy, and those guys, if you feel good about them, feel like safe prospects. Like you kind of know at least what the floor is going to be, and that's pretty high. But do you feel like there is some star potential in there, or is it just about him being an elite level role player? Because I feel like he's still really young, and there could still be something tapped into there with him. Because I know you've been a big fan of him since high school.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that there's a lot to untap with his game. I think it's just one of those situations where, when you kind of take into this is another big thing I learned in scouting. Is a lot of scouts were like, hey, you got to take in what the situation was with these players, especially when it's like a one and done prospect. They're like, okay, well, what was their role immediately? Like, was it the right fit for them? I think with Carter, he had a lot of guys on the team that were ball dominant guys. So he had to learn to play off the ball. I think there's a lot of stuff on the ball that's just kind of going to be untapped, and it's not going to come together right away, but I think it can be. I think he's just starting out a 3-and-D, like really high floor guy that is like, okay, as it progresses, there's going to be something else here to untap, and there's a lot of upside. So that's why I'm just personally so high on him as a prospect, because I think that's where the intel is always so valuable, because like it's a hard work ethic kid that lives in the gym, that I think has high intangibles, wants to be coached, wants to be great. So that stuff checks out in the off season, when they're like, okay, let me go work on my game. So I think there's a lot of stuff with Carter that's just kind of waiting to rise to the surface. And that's why this year, him showcasing like the 3-point shot and the defense was such a big developmental like pathway for me. I was like, oh man, this is great.
What are the best fits for him, do you feel like, from maybe starting at 6 going down to maybe the end of the lottery? What one or two teams do you like the most for his developmental path in terms of like immediate guy who can come in and be that 3-and-D guy we saw at Arizona, but also a team that you trust could maybe tap into some of that other star potential on ball stuff?
Yeah, it's, fit wise always gets a little tough, because like I could say, hey, 6 to Washington or 8 to Brooklyn, and people will be like, that's really early. And I'm like, no, I understand that, but it's terms of like, they will let him play and get him reps. Like Washington, I think, did a great job with their youth last year of just like, you guys are playing, make mistakes, because you're going to learn. And that's something that's actually really rare with teams, is like ownership being okay with like, it's all right, just play the young guys, let them develop. So I think those two spots would be great for just his development. And I don't know, maybe Brooklyn tries to trade up from their later picks, but I think Portland would make a lot of sense too, with just kind of, hey, let's install some confidence and be patient. We've got depth. We've got veterans that have been all over the place. Houston maybe at 10. If I don't know, there's a lot of teams that you kind of go down the list and you're like, make a lot of sense for Carter Bryant. This is the type of player. So I think it's going to be really interesting. Maybe San Antonio, if he's somehow on the board at 14, you never really know right now.
Yeah, all those teams would be really fascinating, because like you said, it feels like he could be an immediate contributor to maybe like a Houston or somebody like that if they trust that, and then letting him grow into that. Although they're really deep right now, barring any kind of trade this offseason. So obviously all that fit stuff determines how good a guy can be, especially in those first couple of years, and how quickly they can grow. So a lot to look for Carter Bryant in these first 2 years. So I want to transition to the second guy we'll talk about, number 12 for you guys on your collective big board. And you guys have him mocked number 7 to the Pelicans, which kind of caught my attention this morning when I got the email in my inbox of you guys of the latest mock draft. But Egor Demin from BYU, the point forward, the Russian, had a very kind of an up and down year at BYU. Scoring kind of came and went. The shooting did not look great most of the time. How did you? What was your process like with Egor? Because obviously he was a 5-star guy, really promising prospect coming in, and kind of gave BYU a lot of hope for the season, which they eventually delivered on, making it all the way to the second weekend. But how did you kind of evaluate him as the year went on, with like I said, the ups and downs that he went through throughout the year?
Yeah, very polarizing prospect this year. Kind of one of the it made you test your instincts as a evaluator and everything. But whenever I have a player like this where I'm scouting all year, I'm kind of, if I ever get puzzled, I'm like, hey, I want to go try to see him in person, because I'm a big believer. Like, in person
Yeah.
scouting is a whole different world. And I actually got to see him against Carter Bryant at Arizona, which is funny that we're talking about both guys, but just a gigantic player that really impressed me in person. And now, I think that especially we mocked him today to the Pelicans, but I think that was for everyone that doesn't know, we do like a war room style. So we kind of go around the room and we nominate the players, and then it comes down to a vote. I think we might have taken 20 minutes for that Pelicans pick. We were like, we have no idea. And there might have been like 8 guys that were in discussion. So it's one of those with Egor. It's really talented feel. Like, it's not just special. It's special somehow with the playmaking seems to like undersell it. It's just that unique. And he's at 6'9". So when I've asked teams around the league throughout the year, they were very high on him still. And they just said, you can't teach feel and you can't teach size. And he's got both of them. So it kind of comes down to, if the shot it comes around consistently, you all of a sudden unlock some versatility with Egor for offensively. But there's still some stuff that needs to be worked out, but he's had as good of a pre-draft process, I think, as anyone right now. He's just aced everything. So, just like we talked about with Carter Bryant, like, if you ace the test when it comes to the pre-draft process and the combine, you really can get going up some boards. So I think he's the wild card that we don't know where he could go right now. It seems like no number's too high, but it's going to be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I got to watch him in person when he played at CU last during the season. I think it was like late January. They had kind of had a weird start to Big 12 play, BYU did, and then they rattled off 5 straight wins, starting with a kind of a dominant win at Colorado, which everybody was beating Colorado in the Big 12 last season. But they had a really impressive second half led by him and Egor and Richie Saunders. Who's going to be an interesting guy to watch next season in college basketball. But were you surprised he didn't consider going back? Because obviously AJ Debanta's coming to Provo next year. There obviously a lot of people were. Well, you mentioned NBA people were talking about him still as a pretty bona fide lottery guy throughout the year, just with the measurables and the field, the stuff that you can't teach. But it felt like there was a really big chance maybe to improve for him as a scorer and with his shooting, and just to play with a guy like AJ would have been a huge spotlight. I feel like for him, every game would have been nationally televised. It probably still will be nationally televised. Did you think maybe he would consider that at all?
Yeah, it's one of those that I kind of crept in my mind towards as it was getting closer. I was like, it could make some sense. And then you just kind of always sit there and you're like, well, if I'm sitting around and I'm like, hey, I just had my freshman year, I probably am going to be projected in the top 20. It's like,
yeah,
I've seen how quickly it could also go the other way. So it's just hard to sell on that. And then I think it just comes down to like, hey, how much do you believe of like you can really showcase in this process? I think he's done everything as perfect as you can right now. I would have loved to see him with AJ and another year, because I still have my questions about Egor, but I understand the sell is pretty easy for NBA teams, because they just, as much as we all love to say like, hey, teams love 3-and-D, they also love positional versatility. Like, if you have that size advantage, they hunt that. So I think that's why teams are still buying Egor. And yeah, he's got to fill out his body, he's got to get a little tougher on the ball, but there's a lot of good stuff that you can't teach. You can't just suddenly like magically create it. It's just God-given ability. So it's going to be really interesting. But I thought there was a real shot that maybe he could have gone back, but then I was like, maybe we're going.
So where do you have? I know because oh, my dog's barking in the background here. He's going nuts. But the big board you guys have is consensus. So where do you have Egor? Because I think I have him at number 19 overall on my big board that I had last week, and you guys have him at 12. How high are you on him?
I've got him right now. I've got him around 13. It's tough because I think about like 13 to 20 on my board is a very slim like margin. Like each day I'm like, oh gosh, now I have him moved up 2 spots. It kind of gets to that point in the draft where you really are just getting picky. And I've asked teams before and they're like, oh, I've got him in this range, and I was like, oh, I have him here, and they're like, oh, that's the same. I'm like, well, that's 10 spots different. They're like, yeah, but it's pretty much the same. So like, it's one I have Egor at 13. I think I'm just buying in still on like, hey, if the shot does come around, what does this look like? And you're probably like, oh gosh, this is a really fun player. So yeah, it's tough. I think I moved him down a bunch and then went and saw him in person. And I was like, I get it. I understand now. Like I get it. So that's why I always love to see guys in person, because it clears your head. You figure out if you don't like them or you do like them.
Yeah, it's weird because I have him one spot below Walter Clayton, and it's just like one of those really weird things where it's kind of that really range. And I'm like, well, these are two wildly different players. And I have him sandwiched in between Walter Clayton and Will Riley. Just like it's a really weird range that range, like you said, from like once you get past, because I have Derek Queen at 12. So like once you get past him, it's like just a bunch of guys that I kind of like. There's guys I like. There's guys I definitely feel better about having a specific role. Obviously, I want to ask about fits for Egor as well. It's probably similar in terms of guys that'll let him work through some of the kinks. But do you feel like there's a path for him to being a high-level starter, even if he's not ever and creating jumpers for himself? Or do you feel like he's got to be – can he be like a guy who makes catch-and-shoot threes and creates for others on the ball? Or do you feel like he's got to at least develop some kind of jumper off the dribble, whether it's from three or in the mid-range, to him for be a high-level starter in the league?
Yeah, I think so. It might take a little bit longer for him to kind of figure out that, because like if the shot's not going to ever come around, say he's floating mid or low 30% from downtown, it's like, well, then you've got to find another way. So then it's like, okay, you got to develop a great floater, or you got to do something else in between game. I think we always with scouting is like obsessive, like, if he doesn't figure out the shot, he's not going to be good. It's like, well, that's not necessarily true. He can untap something else to make him a serviceable player, and his size is going to always help him give a chance at the NBA level. Like Josh Giddey was a name that's always thrown around when it's Egor, when it comes to comparisons. I think he's got a little bit more athleticism, but Giddey's figured out how to be a heck of a player. So I think Egor can figure that out. It just seems like it gets a little bit more of a narrow pathway if the shot doesn't ever come around. If the shot comes around, you could be like, hey, we could play him as a 3 in some lineup rotations. We could play him as a 2. But it's one of those, I think he'll be fine. It's just really exciting if the shot does come around. And from what I've heard in workouts, he's been shooting the cover off the ball. So it's going to be really interesting. It's like, okay, workouts is one thing. Let me see if this is going to translate and be real.
Yeah, he shot the ball pretty well here in Denver that first weekend of the tournament. I wasn't here for that. I was in Seattle, obviously, but I was obviously tuned in and watching BYU, and he definitely, the shot looked a little bit better. I mean, it's interesting to see how a guy maybe tweaks things throughout the year just to get, and he was definitely a guy that relied on confidence for sure, especially with that jumper. All right, we'll transition to the last guy here before wrapping up with some rapid fire questions for you. Obviously, a guy I know well, Nique Clifford, have covered his entire college career. Colorado Springs kid. Played 3 years at Colorado, last 2 at CSU. You guys have him at 13 on your consensus big board, and you guys mocked him number 17 to the Timberwolves today. That's actually, I did an article about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago ranking my 5 best fits for Nique. And I actually had him to Minnesota at number 17 as my top fit for him. I just really like him as a potential Nickeil Alexander-Walker replacement there. But do you feel like for Nique, because obviously you've been high on him kind of all season. I remember, kind of seeing your posts and stuff throughout the year about how much you've enjoyed watching Nique. Obviously, I've watched him almost all of his home games in person the last couple of years, so I obviously well aware of what Nique can do. Do you feel like he's becoming the upperclassman victim of this year, as just kind of the guys that people want to be really high on them, but the age number always kind of scares scouts and executives off?
Yeah, it's my nightmare. Every year I joke, this is my nightmare, as like the upperclassmen that might go later in the draft, and people, it's just because of the age. I think some teams just kind of be like, well, he's older, so we can't draft him that high. And I'm like, well, if he's a good player and you believe in him, should it really matter that much? Now, yes, it does matter, because you're trying to project like, hey, what's the amount of basketball left, and what is the upside and potential. But like, I also just think like, hey, just because they're older doesn't mean they can't figure out more moves in their game or craft or other ways. So I love Nique. I think at No Ceilings we're a lot higher than probably some teams are when it comes to Nique. So I know we have him projected where we do, and everyone will hear that big board ranking be like, whoa, you guys have him really high. And it's like, yeah, but I think we've loved them since last year.
I have him at 10 on my big board. So you guys,
yeah. I got him at 12.
I got him right behind Carter Bryant. Yeah.
Those are two of my favorite guys in class. And Nique's one of the easiest guys I've watched this year and last year. I was just like, this is absolutely a guy I would want to draft if I was an NBA team. I had an exec this year tell me, like, I really like this sleeper in the beginning of the year, Nique Clifford. I was like, he ain't no sleeper. I was like, you better wake up. He is not a sleeper. So it's just one of those guys that every time I watch his tape, it's the easiest, most enjoyable tape, because I'm just like, last year I thought Colorado State asked him to do a lot more when it came to like the defense and side, and it was very impressive this year. I think they wanted him to be more offensive heavy, and he stepped up for every challenge. And I also like the guys that faced adversity early on in their career, battled through it, figured out a way, and now are really playing some good basketball. So, yeah, I think he's gonna be a steal wherever he goes. I really do.
Yeah, just a wild journey for him, because I mean, he was a guy who was a highly touted prospect out of high school in Colorado at 4-star, a bunch of offers from everywhere. But he felt like he was going to be a one and done when he got to Boulder, and obviously he didn't really even play that much during that weird COVID year. He didn't. He actually got in a couple NCAA tournament games at the end as a bench warmer at the end of the season, but did not play a ton. And then his was a starter as a sophomore and a junior, and you could really see his confidence falling off by the end of his third season in Boulder. Just the limited role he had, just really, unless he was wide open, he wasn't shooting the ball on the perimeter. And even he was not even as confident attacking closeouts. And then you put on the CSU Maryland game from the second round of the tournament this year, and it's like, is that even the same player? I mean, you mentioned him last year in the draft process as well. Obviously, he declared, ends up coming back. And you also mentioned how guys, even despite being above 21 years old, 22 years old, can still add things. And I think Nique is the perfect example of that, because of what he showed and showcased last season after coming back. And he probably would have went undrafted last year, or maybe been a late second round pick in a bad draft. And now he's, top 20 potentially in a much, much better draft. I mean, how quickly last season watching him, whether it was in November, December, in some of they struggled obviously out of the gate, but how quickly did you realize Nique had taken a leap with that decision to come back?
Yeah, it was one of those, because at No Ceilings, we're trying to talk about as many prospects as we can to start the year. So we're guilty of doing the same thing as everyone. Like, while we're trying to catch up on tape, a lot of guys, we're box score watching. We're like, okay, who's had a good game here? Because you're also trying to be like, oh, Nique did this last night, I need to turn it on. And it was one of those where I was like, I have no doubts going into this year that Nique's going to play great. I have no doubts. And then you started seeing the numbers. And I was like, great. And I joked with my podcast co-host, Tyler Metcalf, like, he would tell me like, hey, Nique's been on fire to start the year. And I was like, I don't want to watch it yet, because I know I'm going to fall way too in love. And then I watched it kind of the middle of the year. I caught up on all this stuff, and I was like, oh man, he's looked great. So I just, it's what you exactly said. Like, going from being a big time recruit to getting humbled really quick can break a lot of players, a lot of prospects. And I think when you show that you can battle through it and find a way to really unlock your game and showcase it, I think that's what makes Nique such a unique talent. So it's funny, because every year this happens where like the age guys go lower in the draft, potentially they end up in a great spot with a good team, and all of a sudden it's like, why did this guy drop? And it's like, well, we do this every year. So sometimes it's a blessing. But yeah, it didn't take long for me to realize, like, oh, here, because you're also looking at the advanced numbers, but
yeah,
you see the tape, you see the numbers, you see the production, and I'm like, yep, Nique's just keep being Nique. It's not a shocker.
And obviously, like you said, the fit is going to be really interesting for him and kind of where he lands. Could you see him being a playoff contributor right away? I mean, we do this every year, and a lot of people talk about it. Like, we watch the playoffs, and because the draft is happening at the same time, it's like you're trying to look at these prospects as could you see them in a finals game or an Eastern Conference Finals game or something like that? Is Nique a guy? Obviously, the Timberwolves could really continue to add depth, and Nique would be an important piece of that. Is Nique a guy that right away you could see him being a part of a playoff rotation?
I think so. It's always tough, because it's funny, on the night of the draft, we'll see kind of some players land in certain spots, and you're like, oh man, that's going to be a tough one for a rookie to get minutes, just because there's coaches like that. And I think if you're a rookie that buys into, like, I have to play defense to get on the court, I think coaches will trust you then, but you have to be outstanding there. They have to be able to trust you. The veterans on the team got to be able to trust you. And that's where I would lean on an older prospect. And I even hate saying that for Nique, but like it is true. It's like he's going to be able to be like, what do you need me to do early on? I think a lot of guys, like a lot of teams I ask, they say when a player hasn't humbled themselves and are unrealistic about the role right away as a rookie, it's a red flag for us. He's like, if a guy comes in and he's like, oh, I'm going to be the guy. And it's like, you're going in the second round. No, you're not going to be the guy. So I think Nique could be a surprise, like, oh, he's playing big rotation minutes and maybe not starting, but maybe he's like, hey, he's our 6th or 7th guy off the bench, or 6th or 7th man, excuse me. Yeah, I absolutely could buy it. And Minnesota is a great fit there. I think there's a run of teams kind of around that range that make a lot of sense for him. And I also think maybe he's a sneaky guy that someone could trade up for. That's like, hey, we need a Nique Clifford in our team. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a high floor for him and ability to maybe be an early rookie contributor that shocks some people.
He's always been viewed as a guy that could be a 3-and-D guy in the NBA. I remember when he was on the team with both Tristan DeSilva and KJ Simpson a couple years ago at CU, I remember telling people Nique has the best NBA potential out of all of those guys. And Tristan obviously went really high in last year's draft, and Nique might not go that high in this year's draft, but showcasing what he did this past season, do you feel like he could be even more than what people expect of him as a 3-and-D guy? Like, do you feel like the handle improvement he showed last year and the shot creation stuff he showed last year is real, and that stuff could translate to the NBA as well? And it may be obviously a smaller role, but do you feel like that stuff is something teams will ask him to do and not just be the 3-and-D guy that the archetype suggests maybe?
Yeah, I think he's just kind of a Swiss Army knife for your team. I hate throwing this name out now because whenever a player all of a sudden gets like really successful, then people are like, whoa, you're comparing. And I'm like, no, I'm just saying this is the same vibes I have watching their tape. But he reminded me a lot of Jalen Williams at Santa Clara, just kind of like the playmaking, the defense, hey, I can hit the outside shot. Hey, I can be nasty and finish around the basket or rebound. Those guys I'm a soft spot for. Like I check boxes quickly. Like you can do this, do this. Yes, like the consistency from outside, sure, you can argue with that, but it's also like, look at the jumps he's made with that shot. And I've seen what Colorado State like asked him to do some different things a little bit more. Anytime a guy goes back, it's always a scare because you're like, oh, they're going to give him everything offensively to kind of be like, you're the man, handle it. And you see some percentages maybe go down a little bit, but when a guy continues to improve after getting more responsibility, I think that even is a louder statement. So I just think Nique he's going to get like the upperclassman 3-and-D guy. And I'm like, there's way more here than a 3-and-D guy. Like there is some versatility and I think you could put him on ball. He's a great playmaker. Like the Maryland game, he made a couple passes. You're just like, man, this kid just can play. So I think there's a lot more to his game, and he's going to get drafted lower. I'm telling you, Tyler, I know it, and I'm going to be furious.
Oh, I'm ready for it too. I'm ready for my draft night coverage to be going on a little bit longer. Although last year I had 3 guys to write about. Well, 2 on the first round with both Cody Williams and Tristan DeSilva, but I'm ready for him to fall a little bit farther. And me as a believer in him, I'm going to be and someone who knows him pretty well. Like I'm excited for wherever he lands because I think he's a guy that's going to buy into whatever he's asked to do and be an instant contributor right away. Hopefully it's for a team that is able to make a deep playoff run next year because I think fans around the NBA will enjoy watching Nique as well. So before I get you out of here, Tyler, this has been a really, really fun conversation. Just 4 quick rapid fire draft questions for you. 30 seconds or less. Starting off first, who's the best fit for the Jazz at number 5?
I think it's going to be probably Trey Johnson, in my opinion. It's just a name I think they're very high on, and it makes a lot of sense. I love Trey. I think he's a really...
I do too. Yeah. I'm at 3 on my board.
Yeah, he's a high upside guy to me. I think I have got him at 3 or 4. I think he's perfect there. I think people will be a little shocked.
Yeah, and then second one, how high does Carter Bryant go? How high do you think he goes?
This is the time of the year we kind of try to dig around to be like, hey, the intel buzz starts happening. You start getting calls and everything. So this is the time of year we try to be like, okay, is the momentum real or has the train stopped a little bit? I still think kind of at that starting at like 9 is where the conversation starts. It wouldn't shock me if he goes like late lottery, but it also, and I'm talking more of like 14-ish.
Yeah.
But I also think like 9, 10, 11 is where probably it's like, okay, the conversation's starting. Yeah, so I'll say that range.
And then next question, better player in 5 years, Egor Demin or Kasparas Yakuchonis?
That's a tough one. That one really hurts. You know, I'll say Kasparas actually. I've got him high on my board. I love him. I think he's really, really impressive. I think he's kind of like the public's cooled on him a lot, and he had a forearm injury, really struggled like coming back from it shooting. But before then, he was fantastic, and his tape overseas when he was with kind of Barcelona for the youth squads was tremendous too. So I like Kasparas a lot. So I'll say there.
I just wanted to compare those two, the kind of the big point forward kind of guys. Obviously, Yegor's got 3 inches on Kasparas, but
Right.
kind of the same archetype of players. It's been interesting to watch those guys throughout the draft process. And then last one, ideal pick for the Suns at number 29. Kind of obviously because they're trying to get any help they can get on the roster, and we'll see what they look like after the Kevin Durant trade and if Bradley Beal's on the team next year. But they got to hit on this pick at 29 if they want to salvage the next couple of years, and not in like a star way, but just kind of any kind of guy that can play for them. Who would be the best if he falls or whatever? Who's the best guy that they could get at 29? That's really
I think they got to get a little bit lucky, but this just every year with the draft, some names can fall and kind of surprise some people. I think Walter Clayton would be a name there that if he fell, it'd be a little shocking at this point, just because I think he's had a great kind of second half of the year. Ben Seraph, I think, would be a international guard. I still think he's going to go before them, but it would be a really good fit for them. And then maybe Maxime Reynaud from Stanford, the big man, is still on the board. I kind of like a Deuce Thiero for them from Arkansas. I think that
I
would
like
just
him
be
a lot. Yeah,
it would be kind of just like a, hey, let's get some toughness and player is going to play his butt off all the time. That would make some sense. So they're in a weird spot. I keep waiting like, hey, they better get another pick. They better make a trade and get another pick in this draft. So it's going to be interesting.
All right, Tyler, that's all I got for you today. This is a great conversation on Carter Bryant, Egor Demin, Nique Clifford, obviously the rapid fire stuff at the end. So make sure to go check out all Tyler's work at Tyler_Rucker on X and NoCeilingsNBA.com for the best NBA draft coverage. Like I said, the draft guide's available, mock drafts, big boards. You guys got a whole host of people doing really good work over there. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right, that'll do it for part 1 of today's episode. Thanks again to Tyler Rucker from No Ceilings for coming on to do some deep dives on the top draft prospects we've got here in the Mountain Time Zone. Stay tuned for part 2, where Troy Finnegan and I will have the second part of our conversation from last week, talking about the Jazz's options at number 21. Did a deep dive on about 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys that we think the Jazz could target at number 21. So stay tuned for part 2. And thanks again to Tyler Rucker from No Ceilings for deep diving some of these guys here. All right, we are back on Basketball Mountains. And we are going to, last week we did the Jazz options at number 5, and that conversation obviously ran very, very long. So this is part 2 of that between Troy and I, Troy Finnegan from ClutchPoints. We are talking about Jazz, their options at number 21, because obviously, as like many of the bad teams in the draft, they have multiple first-round picks. I think Brooklyn has like 4 first-round picks. Obviously, Oklahoma City has multiple, and could have had even more if it didn't go their way. But there's San Antonio has, I think, 2 in the top 15. So a lot. There's like a third of the league has like 80% of the draft picks at this point.
Poor Oklahoma City. I feel terrible for them.
Yeah, as
they didn't
probably
get a top 10 pick. Gosh.
As they're probably, I don't know, we're recording this before the finals starts, but they're probably up 2-0 in the finals by the time this airs. But anyway, we'll talk about Utah and the guys that could be there at number 21. And I obviously revealed my big board on the last podcast, and I did have Nique Clifford at number 10. I don't want to spend a ton of time on Nique because I'm not sure if he's going to fall to 21 at this point. And I'm going to do an episode later in the month as we get closer to the draft, focusing on Nique and Carter Bryant and Egor Demin, the guys from the the teams that we cover on this podcast, and just kind of diving deeper on those three guys in particular. But Troy, let me get your thoughts quick on Nique as a guy that Utah could be targeting at 21. I mean, I had a story in the Denver Gazette earlier in the week I gave the top 5 fits for him, and I had Minnesota for him at 17 as the best fit, I think, for Nique. But
Don't do that to me.
What do you like about Nique, and kind of what stands out to you as you try to project what he's going to be like in the NBA?
As a Nuggets fan, I beg you to not speak that into existence.
He's
I
just the
don't want
Nickeil
that.
Alexander Walker replacement. I'm sorry.
No, I don't. We don't need that. We need Minnesota to be getting worse. I have Nique at 11 on my big board. I really like him. There's a lot of age scouting happening with him to me. I feel like if he was, because he's 23 and a half, I think.
He turned 23 in February, so
okay,
he'll turn 24 at the end of his rookie season.
He's got a good frame, and I think that he's just going to be an impact player on both ends. Like you said, the Nickeil Alexander Walker replacement is a great comp. He makes a bunch of impact plays as a defender, and I think that his frame allows him to hold up on defense play to play, between the big, he get his big splash plays on that end. And I think that the 5th year, I mean, we'll talk about guys who didn't get these reps in college who I wish did shortly, I think. But I think that the 5th year really helped him because he developed so much as an on-ball scorer. He's not going to be a lead scorer, I don't think, in the NBA, but his ability to handle the ball, create his own shot. I think he's a good playmaker too, which I think really helps him. He's a really well-rounded offensive player. He's really crafty when he gets in the lane into the mid range. He attacks smaller guys really well, and I think that he's crafty enough and good enough with his feet, even though he's not like a super explosive guy, where he can get his shots off. Get to his spot and get his shots off. He's a really savvy scorer. Is kind of how I had it. The question will be like, is he going to become a more consistent spot up shooter? Because that's going to inevitably be a big part of his role. But I expect that he'll be fine there, not a negative in that area. But I really like Nique as just a really well-rounded two-way wing prospect who's played a lot of basketball. I think he's plug and play in the rotation. He could come in and help you right away. And that's why I'm very high on him relative to the consensus.
Yeah, I have him at 10, like I mentioned. So I don't think it's much of a realistic option for Utah, even if he's on the board. I think he's just not a guy that fits with the timeline of what they're trying to do. Although that, like we talked about last week, like the Austin Ainge news, like they could be trying to get the rebuild going a little bit quicker, and Nique would certainly be an interesting guy for that. But the other 5 guys I want to talk about, I think, are a little bit more realistic and a little bit more interesting for the context in Utah. The first guy is Danny Wolf, the big man from Utah, or from Michigan, previously from Yale, spent 1 season at Michigan last year, and just a really, really interesting player in the context there with the Wolverines, and Dusty May, his first year at the coach. They made it all the way to the Sweet 16. A really, really, really fun player to watch. A face-up guy, despite being 7 foot tall. Played alongside Vlad Golden, who could be a second-round pick. Just the Twin Towers they had there at Michigan. I think Danny Wolf has been mocked to Utah a lot at 21, so that's why I wanted to talk about him. I forget exactly where I had him on my board. I think I have him at like 15 or 16 overall. But I think he's a really, really intriguing player as a playmaker, good ball handler for the size. I think he's got positional versatility as well. It's all just kind of about the athleticism and if you trust him as a jump shooter as well.
You have him where?
16, I think.
16?
16, yeah.
I'm going to have to be the negative Nelly here.
That's fine. That's fine.
I have him at 29. I think that the idea of Danny Wolf is a lot better than Danny Wolf in practice. I do think that like his best fit is next to another big, like he played with Golden, and I think that they worked really well. Obviously, they were a good team, even though their guards were pretty spotty, especially outside of Trey Donaldson for most of the year. But the handle is a little bit overstated to me. Like I don't think he does anything super well in traffic is the thing that I had written down. Whether it's finishing, whether it's handling, I just think that pressure really disrupted him a lot of the time, and I didn't like. That's hard for me to kind of get over for a big guy who is billed as a like this playmaking, ball handling, like he's a shooter, but I don't really love the shot that much. There's a lot of, ironically, not comparing the players, but there's a lot of bull and like the evaluation of him to me, where it's like, oh, he's tall and he can shoot a step back three and he can dribble behind his back, and it's like, well, I don't know if I'm there with him. And I do think that the upside there is worth betting on, because if he improves in traffic and he improves the jumper, he can be a really good offensive player. He is a good passer. The athleticism is a problem. That's going to hurt him, especially defensively. Yeah. But I also think that it hurts him offensively. Like, I think that he will struggle to create a lot of space from NBA defenders because of the athleticism. And then you run into the problem of him struggling in traffic. He turned it over a lot, again, kind of on the same theme. And then the shot is, you know, it looks good, but his percentages weren't great. His shot diet was pretty tough. He takes a lot of step back threes, and but we'll see how the free throw shooting was weird. He shot like 59% from the foul line this year, and he was better than that at Yale.
Yeah,
so
that was the thing with him. I liked.
Yeah, it could be a total blip, but I was just like, there's a lot here that I'm betting on that I can't see. So I agree with you that it's an intriguing player, and he is a fun player to watch in college basketball. Translating it, I couldn't really get there with Wolf.
Yeah, that's fair. I had him one spot behind the guy who I have at 15 and who I actually like a lot more, and that's Thomas Sorber from Georgetown, who was having a really good, I felt like, freshman year at Georgetown before he got hurt in February. What was that, like a foot injury? I think it was.
Yeah, something like that.
But he was out for the season after that. Averaged 14.5 points per game, 58% true shooting. Really good rebounder. He's a two-way big. I like the way he plays the game. I think he's a good processor, and especially defensively. And I don't buy as much of the post stuff on offense. Like, I think he's going to mostly be a defense first big, who can be a kind of a play finisher, not like an above the rim play finisher, so to speak, but a guy who you can get the ball to in the post, on a mismatch or something, and he's able to finish around the rim. He's a tough guy to move. He's really big and physical despite being 19 and a half years old. So I have him at 15. I think he's a tier above Danny Wolf, but I what do you like about Sorber? Like, if he's there at 21 for Utah, I think that would be an awesome find.
Sure. I also have him at 15. He's so impressive for a young guy, like, because his intangibles are so impressive for a guy his age playing on a team that isn't very good.
Yeah.
He plays the game like a vet, and it's really fun to watch. Like you mentioned, the processing. I think he's got great feel. Like, even as a screener, like he knows when to slip. He kind of has a good feel for the space and where everything is. I think he works. I think he gets himself looks around the basket with that a lot. Even like flashing and cutting. I think he's really smart with that. And that's, I think, especially if you don't buy the post stuff as much and the shot is not there right now, I would be okay not watching him shoot another 18-footer.
Yeah, I don't really need to see it. Yeah,
there's some rough, because he would shoot it sometimes, and there was some rough ones.
Part of that was because the team he was on, like you said, wasn't very good. But
they were not good. So I do agree with you. Like, this is an impact big to me. We'll see how much growth there is, because it feels like the areas where it feels like the thing with him would be like, oh, he's a young guy, so he's going to get so much better. And it was like, it almost feels like he's already good at the areas where young players would usually improve. And I don't necessarily see the ceiling with the stuff that he's not as good at right now. So it's kind of a weird where he's a young guy who's probably closer to. He's just easier to project, I think. He kind of reminds me of Al Horford.
That's a great comp, actually. I think I love that comp, actually.
Just like with the stocky build, and like you mentioned, he's tough to move, and he's just such a smart player.
He's not an above the rim guy, but he's a really good defender.
Totally. Yeah. But I think he's a decent, like like you mentioned, he's a play finisher. He just is such an intangible guy.
I do think the shot could come around too. I do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If
it would take some work, but and I mean, he wasn't like a non-shooter. He was a bad shooter, but he wasn't like a zero. Zero.
And I don't think the form is impossible to work with either.
No, totally. Yeah, I agree. But it was just, he was such a unique, especially, I mean, like I watched a decent amount of Georgetown, but it wasn't like Duke where I watched every single one of their games during the season because they are not very good. So going back and watching him was really cool to kind of break him down and see just a unique blend of strengths as a young guy. Who I think can come in and plug and play. I mean, obviously we have him in the same spot, so I like Sorber a lot.
Next guy I want to talk about is Will Riley from Illinois, a wing who loves to shoot the ball. That is for sure. He really likes to shoot the ball. Some of the shots are not great, for sure.
Nope.
He likes to shoot over people, for sure, and he's 6'9". That's the thing with him, is the frame. You're buying the frame.
Yeah, totally.
The wingspan isn't great. Like in shoes, he's got a neutral or negative wingspan. And he is skinny. Like he really needs to add weight to that frame. But he is he's a good mover off the ball, and he gets into good areas, and I think he's a connective player. Like I don't think he's a selfish player at all.
Yeah.
But you're buying a 3-point shot that wasn't great last season. He shot the ball great early in the season, but then getting into conference games and against some of the better teams, he shot under 30% from three in conference games and against top 100 and top 50 opponents. But he doesn't turn the ball over a ton. You're just kind of thinking him as he's a right now he's a theoretical 3-and-D wing because the D really isn't there right now. But I think you're kind of betting on the tools there for him. And I have Will Riley at 20. So
I also have him at 20.
The
first two things I have are we need to put this guy on some creatine. And the second thing is I just really wanted him to go back to school. I just really wanted him to go back to school. Especially some of the guys that are going back to school, and I'm like, Will Riley couldn't go back to school, but some of these guys, so I'm like, you could get picked. These guys are going back. But yeah, you nailed it. I do think like the upside offensively is really there because he makes a lot of tough shots. But he's just such a raw, talented player offensively with some of the shots that he makes, but he does get downhill. Like he didn't have a ton of obviously like on ball creation reps, but I do think like he showed decent flashes as a passer and like working in like the pick and roll. I thought he was okay, and finishing I thought he was, there's a lot to work with, like you said. He's just, and obviously defensively he's kind of all over the place as a young guy who is out there to shoot a lot of threes. But I think that he, it's going to take a lot of molding. I think that he needs to go somewhere where he can sit and play bench minutes, and
that's why I have him here at Utah for 21, because I think that's an interesting context.
Totally. And I mean, as a guy who will get picked probably in the 20s or in the late teens, that will likely be what he gets. But the shot making when he is going, like, was it the second tournament game or the first one? Which of the tournament games did he go?
I feel like it was the first one, but I don't fully remember. But yeah, there was a tournament. Like I said, he shot really well. He shot really well early in the season, and then it kind of fell off a cliff late in the year. It was the Xavier game. Yeah, it was.
And then he thought he was still hot in the Kentucky game, and he was not. He was
No.
not.
Yeah, no, he was 3-4 on threes in the Xavier game when they won.
Yeah, so when he starts making shots, I mean, you could see it. Like you can see the upside as a big, lanky shooter.
And he's willing to shoot over just about anybody. Like there's
totally.
not a guy that contests him and bothers him.
And he's going to get a shot off, but he's also a guy who then, if he develops into a consistent shooter, I think that he has enough getting downhill and getting the basket, and as a secondary passer, obviously kind of like we mentioned with Murray Boyles on the last pod, simple reads, but I think that he has an understanding where he's just not torpedoing into somebody.
He doesn't have
stepping
tunnel
up
vision
out of.
when he's got the ball.
Yeah, he's not just going to jump into somebody coming up out of the low hole and just torpedo himself into a low percentage finish. Like he can keep the ball moving. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I do think the upside is hard not to like, especially when you get into this range in the late teens and the early 20s.
Last two guys I wanted to talk about. First, my guy, Rasheer Fleming from St. Joe's, a Philly guy. I'm not saying my guy in terms of I have him high. I have him at 19, but he's an older guy. He's 21, played 3 years at St. Joe's in the A10. You're kind of prototypical 3-and-D 4. I think if you're projecting Rasheer Fleming, I do think he's a pretty good athlete. I think he's got some shot blocking upside on defense, and you're hoping he's the guy that spaces the floor offensively. Not hoping he does a ton other than that offensively, but I do think he's got some potential to be not as athletic, but like a later stage in his career Jeff Green type of a floor spacer at the 4, and a guy who can provide some athleticism and shot blocking on defense. What do you like about Rasheer?
I love this guy. I love Rasheer. I have him in that group with Nique and with Carter Bryant. And
nice. Yeah, I was afraid to put him that high as a Philly bias kind of thing, but
I
really
have
like
him up. I have him up there. The shooting is going to be interesting because it was a big spike last year.
Yes.
I think he was like 32% the year before and 39% last year.
Yeah, 39 last year, 32 as a sophomore, and he was just under 30 as a freshman. Yeah, it got better.
Yeah, and I think his quirk was that he was really awesome above the break and not as great in the corners.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that lasts. Obviously, you mentioned the self creation is not really there.
No, and 97% of his threes were assisted last year.
Yeah, so like he's not
doing it for himself. Yeah.
Yeah, his consistency defensively is not awesome, but you mentioned the flashes as a shot blocker and as kind of an interior defender. He's also a playmate. Like he's a playmaker on defense. Like he gets so many pick sixes and like
he does take risks on defense.
Yeah, sure. And he's got like his wingspan was crazy, like 7'5".
Yeah, it's a crazy wingspan. Yeah, it's 7'5.3". Yeah,
the tools are awesome defensively. He's a monster in transition. I actually liked he's not the best athlete you've ever seen, but I thought, especially as a shot blocker, I thought he got off the ground really quickly.
Yeah.
When he's the second guy off the floor, he still gets to a lot of shots from especially guards that are coming in, driving in. He also, back to the shot, he also spiked as a free throw shooter. So that kind of makes me
it went from 61 as a sophomore to 74 last year. So there was some tweak that we don't know about with this shot.
That made me, this was part of the reason why I had him so high, was because that made me more optimistic that it wasn't an outlier, that he just became a better shooter, which would be big for him. But I just really like him defensively with the frame. I think offensively, as obviously the shot will be a big deciding factor.
It's really kind of all he provides you offensively. Like he's not an offensive rebounder. He's a pretty solid defensive rebounder, but he's not a great offensive rebounder. You're really just hoping he's a guy that is a weapon in whether it's in the corner or, like you said, above the break as a stretch 4 that kind of gets left alone at times.
Yeah, the other thing that I really liked about him was he is a smart cutter and like a flasher. Like he gets a lot of baskets. Just like when his guy falls asleep on defense or something, like his guy helps a step too far, he's finding the space and he's finishing around the basket. That's what I really liked about him. He makes himself available on offense really well. And that was something that I really liked. So obviously the red flag is the creation, but there's enough on offense and I'm betting on the shot. And then the tools make him such an intriguing defender as kind of a versatile 4 to me, where I had him so high.
All right, last guy I wanted to hit on is a guy that we've talked about a lot kind of off mic throughout the season, a guy we both really like. But the measurables at the combine were really, really disappointing. And that is, of course, Jace Richardson from Michigan State, who I have at 21 on my board, which is where Utah is picking. And I think would be a really, really interesting fit for Jace, who it's just the underlying numbers are just screaming at you that he's a good basketball player, despite everything about his stature and makeup. I mean, despite the fact that he's Jason Richardson's son, and the wingspan is good. He's got a 6'6" wingspan despite being like 6'1" in shoes. And he could definitely add some muscle to his frame as well. But all of the underlying numbers suggest he's just a really, really solid basketball player, and pretty good at everything. And I obviously the defense is going to be a concern for a guy his size, but I just loved everything I saw from him, especially as we talked about a lot. His role continued to grow and grow and grow and grow as Izzo realized how good he was throughout the year.
And Michigan State got better and better and better. I wonder why that happened.
Yes. And then obviously they ended up losing to Auburn in the tournament, but he was just such a good player. And I still think, despite the size concerns, he's worth betting on.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I was just like, it was the saddest. I think that we talked as soon as the measurement came in, we were both kind of like, oh, really?
Yeah, it's like, couldn't you just be 6'2" without shoes?
Yeah, seriously. Like, I'm not asking for much. Just 6 feet was a little rough.
Yeah, 6'3" in shoes have been great. I would have been like, even 6'2" I could work with. But
he works hard on defense, but he's always like, I mean, he's always just going to be, hey, you come here.
Yeah,
come here.
That was even the case, even the Big Ten last year. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But he's a great offensive player. I have him at 23. I don't know. I might have said that right.
Yeah.
So we're in the same
similar spot,
kind of range here. But I think he's a really well-rounded offensive player. On the ball, off the ball, you know, getting to his spots, can shoot the three. He's got good feel in the mid-range. I think he has got. I think he plays, you know, with the ball in the lane, like inside the 3-point line pretty well, especially as Michigan State started to give him more and more reps. I think he's able to get his shots off. I mean, against college defenders, despite the size, pretty well. I think he's pretty smart with that. We'll see. Obviously, it's going to be bigger, faster, stronger guys guarding him now. So we'll see how that translates. But I do think he's a plus offensive player. The role will be interesting at that size, because I'm not sure he's not like a bad playmaker, but I just don't.
At that size, you kind of almost have to be an on-ball guy.
Totally. And I'm not sure that he is the type of facilitator where he can be a full-time player, like a full-time lead guard. Like he's just kind of a tweener in the sense that he's more of a combo guard, but he's too small to be. So we'll see what the role looks like. I do agree with that Utah is a really interesting fit, because he could play with the second unit. And he would be playing alongside like Collier and some of these other guards that would kind of allow him to find that balance of handling the ball, but also being able to work as a combo guard in a situation that would be pretty low pressure, as he kind of on a Utah team that I don't think we think is going to be very good, as he kind of works through the kinks of how he needs to make an impact at that size, because it'll be an adjustment for a guy who is so small. But you're right. The basketball player itself is really fun, and I think he's a really good player. We loved him all year. So I like him a lot.
I had him top 20. I had him top 20 for most of the year, and like creeping toward that 14, 15 range. But I landed on.
I hate combine scouting. But 6 feet is tough. But I do like
it. Feels really weird to have Will Riley one spot ahead of him. But
I thought the same thing.
But I do, and it's like I just kind of have to trust the NBA body thing, even if I think Obviously, right now, Jace Richardson is just a better basketball player, but
for sure.
there's got to be some projection in it as well.
Yeah.
So those are all the guys that I wanted to cover at 21. Obviously, last week we did a very, very long podcast talking about the guys at number 5. I think we talked about 9 different guys. 5 or 6 of them probably will be who Utah really settles in as they're evaluating these guys going forward. But Troy, thanks for coming on. I always enjoy talking hoops, especially this time of year with the draft and kind of really evaluating all these guys.
Yeah, this was great, man. Thank you. Always a pleasure.
All right, that'll do it from today's episode of Basketball in the Mountains. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you'd like to, on Apple, on Spotify, or if you'd like to just watch these on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. Like it, leave a comment. All of that is super appreciated. So thanks again for everybody for tuning in, and enjoy the week of basketball.